I don't know, is this on? Yeah. All right. Good morning, everybody. All right. I'm going to give you another minute or two to chat, and then we're going to get started. Okay. Well, that was fast. I was going to give you 2 minutes. You guys are very good. All right. Okay. Well, good morning and welcome, everybody. Before we get going, I've asked Andy Iwamoto to share a few things about logistics. And Andy, come on up.
Hi, everyone. I'm Andy Uemoto. I'm the Administrative Director of the Garvey Institute. Just some housekeeping. There's no food or drink allowed in the auditorium. If you may have brought something, there's a trash can up by the door. We have a coat rack right outside the door if you need to put that there, but do remember to take it home with you. We have parking coupons at the front desk if you'd like to get your parking validated. We also have some instructions on how to do that with the machine. If you have any trouble, we've had a little trouble in the past, do let us know right away and we will try to square that up. And I think that is it. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Andy. And thank you all for being here today. Before I get started, I'm going to say a few things. I would say that by nature, I'm an optimist. I came to UW as a fellow in 1994. That's just a little over 30 years ago. And I have seen so much good work, great work, and growth in that time that it's hard for me not to be positive and optimistic. But I also have to sort of acknowledge that the current chaos and the pace of change we're seeing and the uncertainty we're seeing in our government and around the world is starting to weigh on my soul a little bit. And more concretely, I think we have to acknowledge that we have some real concerns in the short run about the threats we see to federal funding for much of what you all do. And I would say, maybe with some perspective, 30 years, for whatever that's worth, I've not seen this before. I've seen other challenges before, and I think we will find our way through that. I think the work we do is important, and it's always going to be important. There is not ever going to be a time, unless we are wildly successful, and that would be wonderful, where there aren't going to be people who are living with mental health and addiction problems who need our help. So that work will be here, and it will still be here. And I think what we're seeing now is we're seeing some of that work being seriously questioned and challenged. And I don't mind tough questions and some challenges, but it does seem like it will be a little bit rocky here. I feel like we're taking a big ship and sailing it through a storm. And I think if we sort of take our sails down just a little bit, adjust some things, think about where we want to be when we come out of the storm, we're going to be okay. In that context, what we're going to talk about today, the work of the Garvey Institute, I think it's a real breath of fresh air. I think it's a wonderful example of what philanthropy can do to help us make our community a better place to work, a better place to live. And I think that's a really great, a big ray of hope for all of us. And for that, I want to thank the Garvey family, Lynn and Mike and Denise, for being here and for making it possible for us really to do all of this great work. So thank you, thank you. Now, I'm going to take a couple minutes to look at our agenda for today. This is the game plan. In a few minutes, I'm going to ask Tim Dellett, who is the CEO of UW Medicine, to join us for a few opening remarks. After that, we're going to spend a little time taking a look back, thinking about some of the highlights of what we've done in the Institute. There's a lot more than I can cram into a presentation, so you're going to get highlights. We've also, I think you all have a copy of this. We have a nice little report on some of the work that we've done. You all have a copy. If you don't have one, you should get one. It's upstairs, and there's a little bit more information and some more the stories about the people doing the work itself. And if you find any of it interesting, you can dig down even more. We have a great website, and there is some Details about every one of the projects that we're doing on the website. Around 10:45, we're going to take a little break. And then we're going to come back down here and we're going to have a really nice conversation with one of our colleagues, one of our collaborators, Tim Althoff. Tim is a computer scientist. He works at the Allen School for Computer Science and Engineering. And we have a really nice collaboration supported by the Institute around exploring what AI, what artificial intelligence could do in helping us do our work, reaching more people. And I really look forward to that conversation. Tim is actually upstairs. He's doing a PhD thesis defense with one of his students. So he's going to join us when he gets done with that. And then I'm going to engage all of you in a little visioning. We're going to do a little exercise where we're going to put our brains, all of your brains together to say, what else could we do going forward? And then we're going to have lunch. And during lunch, we have set up a couple of innovation stations. So when you have your food, go around and talk to some of your colleagues to learn about what they're doing. And then we're going to come back here from 1 to 2 o'clock just to kind of wrap up and to I'll share back with you some of the ideas that you all have presented to us, and I'll share a couple of ideas about things that we have teed up going forward. I think we have enough momentum now that I think we can take on some pretty ambitious projects over the next couple of years, and I'll share a few thoughts about that. And that's how we're going to wrap up the day. So that's the game plan. Okay. Again, huge thanks to Mike and Lynn Garvey and the Garvey family for making it possible for us to do this work with this tremendous foundational gift that we got in 2019. Mike and I were just looking at it and saying, how can it be 5 years? It comes at you fast, but it has been 5 years. We've been working together on this and building some momentum for 5 years. I want to thank our advisory board members. Thank you for being here, for being great advisors for us. None of you are brain health experts, but that's exactly what I wanted. I wanted real people who have life experience in other parts of life, and I think that's been tremendous helpful for us to have your perspective. I want to thank our Institute staff, all of you who are making the Institute work. Becky and Andy and Mary and Jed and Kirsten and Samhar, they're all here. You will have a chance to meet them, I hope. And we have technical support from Annalie. And I want to acknowledge Michelle Lynch, our Vice Chair for Finance and Administration in our department, who has been super helpful in helping the Institute succeed, in our department home. We have a great group of faculty advisors. This is one of the best things about working at the University of Washington. There's so many smart people. If you don't have the answer to something, you don't have to look very far and you'll find some very smart people. They don't always tell you the same thing, and that's good too. But it's been super helpful to have everyone's input and support. And then mostly I want to thank all of you who are doing the work of the Institute. We have, and we'll say a little bit more about this now, we have over 100 people working on a whole host of really interesting projects, and many of you are here, and I want to just thank you for all you do as part of the Institute. With that, I have the great pleasure now of asking my boss, Dr. Tim Dellett. Tim is the CEO of UW Medicine and the Dean of our medical school, and I'm asking him to say a few words to get us started today.
Well, thank you, Jürgen. And again, I also want to really appreciate your comments, just acknowledging some of the challenges and what many in the audience are experiencing in some of the uncertainty, particularly in the research funding environment. I also truly believe we will get through this. We will get through this together. And it's moments like these that bring me joy and help fill that cup. Right? It's really focusing on the amazing things that are happening here. And this is truly a highlight for us at the University of Washington and the impact that this institute is having. So again, welcome to the 4th annual meeting of the Garvey Institute Brain Health Solutions. And just as Jürgen was saying, it is hard to believe that it's already been 5 years that time has gone by, and I'm really looking forward to Jurgen going through all of what has been accomplished, and more importantly, thinking about the future for the Institute. Again, being together with you all today is such an inspiring reminder of what the Garvey Institute is all about. Uniting us as a community, especially during this time, to solve one of the most important challenges of our time. So thank you for being here and your commitment to accelerating effective solutions and treatments for the 50 million Americans experiencing brain disorders. I also want to take a moment to acknowledge, again, this is the 5th anniversary of that foundational gift from Mike and Lynn. We couldn't be here. We wouldn't have this impact without your vision, your partnership, especially the partnership with Dr. Unitzer. So thank you so much. This means so much to us and our community. We couldn't be more grateful for the Garvey's extraordinary generosity, especially as this institute has allowed us to do two things. First, the institute has created the conditions for us to really leverage the rapid advances that we're seeing in neurosciences, genetics, computer science and artificial intelligence, engineering, brain imaging, psychiatry, psychology, neurology, and rehabilitation medicine. It's just what Jurgen showed on that slide. It is a very broad community focused on brain health solutions. And this gives us the opportunity, our teams, the funding and the resources and the support for future focus and to drive innovation in brain health and behavioral health. Secondly, it is also validated that we can be at our best when we are actively collaborating across our University of Washington departments, our schools, our campuses, to achieve our mission to improve the health of the public for all people, offering exceptional care to patients today, training and inspiring the next generation of clinicians and scientists, and developing new and better solutions for tomorrow. The Garvey Institute for Brain Health Solutions is a university-wide initiative. So while it has a home within UW-Medicine and the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences, its impact is across all 3 university campuses. So not just in Seattle, but Bothell and Tacoma. 11 schools and colleges are participating, and 25 departments or divisions. That is phenomenal, and just a testament to the importance and the cross collaboration and that nature of the University of Washington. The work with the Garveys truly exemplifies these as really a shining spot, that commitment to bold, transformative solutions that will shape the future of mental health and brain health care. Now, as many of you know, innovation grants are a core component of the Garvey Institute. These grants provide seed funding for faculty to explore new ideas, build upon existing projects, and have the potential to improve brain health through research, education, patient care, and/or advocacy. These grants have prioritized projects with the greatest potential for impact at the population level and projects that can be sustained beyond the initial grant funding period. Now, remarkably, since 2020, 58 innovation grants have been awarded, catalyzing groundbreaking research and fostering interdisciplinary collaboration. These projects span such areas as brain health, cognitive aging, trauma, addiction, technology, adolescence and young adult mental health, and the use of artificial intelligence to improve brain health and mental health. Now, this morning, we're going to hear from some of the clinicians and scientists working on the most promising projects, including a conversation with Tim Althoff, as Jurgen mentioned. Tim is a professor in the School of Computer Science and Engineering, and he is going to share his thoughts around the extraordinary opportunity to leverage artificial intelligence to better reach and support patients and families in need. The Garvey Institute has also enabled us to attract and retain world-class faculty, ensuring sustained excellence in brain health research and clinical innovation. These outstanding faculty are supported by 2 endowed chairs and 6 endowed professorships. Now, in the short history of this institute, we have already seen meaningful impact in the lives of people. In April, this past year in 2024, we opened the new Garvey Institute Center for Neuromodulation at the Center for Behavioral Health and Learning on the UW Medical Center Northwest campus. This state-of-the-art clinical program offers cutting-edge treatments for a range of brain health and mental health conditions. Neuromodulation treatments are some of the newest, safest, most effective ways we have to treat conditions such as severe depression, bipolar disorder, catatonia, schizophrenia, and other conditions. And the new center is already making a difference in the lives of our patients. This year, the Garvey Institute also launched the Family and Caregiver Training and Support Program, or FACS, ensuring innovations extend beyond patients to their support network. This is incredibly important work. This program was launched with a recognition that families and caregivers are a vital part of their loved ones' recovery. And it provides free online skills training, resources, and strategies for families and caregivers who are supporting an adult living with serious mental illness. And UW Medicine has become a global leader in applying new technology to improve the health of the public. In addition to advancing groundbreaking research, such as the creation of novel proteins to tackle some of the world's greatest challenges, teams across UW Medicine are piloting tools powered by artificial intelligence to reduce clinician burnout and improve patient care. This is an area of massive transformation within healthcare, and the Garvey Institute is creating the conditions to thoughtfully leverage these technologies to improve behavioral health and brain health. And finally, I just want to celebrate the important role that the Garvey Institute has played in training the next generation of leaders in brain health. Because of the Institute, we have welcomed the first 2 fellows in the new Behavioral Neurology and Neuropsychiatry Fellowship, strengthening our expertise in the emerging field at the interface of psychiatry and neurology. Now, brain disorders such as depression, anxiety, traumatic brain injury, post-traumatic stress disorder, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, addiction, autism, and Alzheimer's disease affect nearly half of the world's populations, robbing millions of individuals and their families the opportunity to lead healthy and productive lives. It truly is the biggest challenge that we face regionally and globally. And in fact, the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation at UW Medicine has published that brain health, mental health, and addiction problems are the leading cause of overall disease burden in the world. The University of Washington is a powerhouse in neurosciences expertise. When you combine that collaborative culture, the expertise has the potential to transform brain health research in Seattle and across our 5-state WWAMI region and the world. This is a big priority for us at UW Medicine, and the Garvey Institute is not only a fundamental part of that, but it's leading the way, demonstrating how collaborative cross-disciplinary approaches with agile funding can drive innovation and real solutions that improve outcomes for patients and their families. So again, a huge thanks to the Garvey family. Mike, Lynn, thank you so much for making everything we're going to see today possible. And that impact in our communities is priceless. I also want to congratulate Jürgen and the team at the Garvey Institute for the tremendous progress that they have made in the first 5 years. The initial investments made by the Institute are paying off in a big way. And I am excited to see what happens going forward and collectively thinking together about that vision for the future. Thank you again for your commitment to improving the health for all people, to improving behavioral health, and addressing this real challenge that affects so many in our communities. Again, thank you for being here today. Jürgen?
Well, thank you, Tim. Thank you for your leadership during this really critical time. Thank you for the support for the work that we're all doing here together. I really, really, really appreciate it. Thank you. So I'm going to try to expand a little bit on some of the things you heard from Tim, which is just to take a quick look back at what is it that we've already done, and then hopefully we'll move into thinking about how can we build on that and how do we move forward. Before I launch into that, I'm going to do something a little bit, maybe a little bit silly. And that is, not everybody in this room is an expert on the brain and the brain health. So I'm going to tell you something about the brain 101. And there's people in this room that are way smarter than I am, so you can correct me when I'm getting things wrong. But what is the brain? It's that thing that we have in our head. It weighs about 3 pounds. That makes up 2% of your total body weight. But that 2% of your body weight uses 20% of all the energy that your body uses. So it's doing something. What's inside that? There is 100 billion little nerve cells called neurons. And those nerve cells are supported by 100 billion glia. Those are little support cells. And all of these cells are connecting and talking to each other through 100 trillion connections. And so what does that look like? It's hard to imagine for a human brain. Maybe computers can do it, but it's hard to imagine for a human brain what that really means. How is that connected? There is very complex circuitry with all those connections. There's something called the connectome. That's basically the story of all of the major things connect to each other. And most of us are born with most of that hardware in place by the time we're born. But then that connectome really gets pretty substantially modified until your mid-20s. It still gets modified later on in life. It's got to be one of the most interesting, most complicated organs that we have. I don't think we've built anything like that yet. People working on that, people like Tim maybe are working on that. But that's what got me interested in working with the brain. What does the brain do? What do we need it for? Well, a healthy brain helps you to do a lot of things. It helps us to process information. All that stuff that I'm doing right here that you're sort of processing right now, that's getting processed by your brain. It's creating consciousness and it's helping us create experiences. And I think that there are some of us who would argue that's something that makes us uniquely human, that we can reflect on the fact that we have a brain and that we're conscious. It creates memories, it solves problems, it controls your thoughts, your feelings, your behaviors, your actions, your speech, and it makes you who you are as a person. I think it really shapes our personality. So that's a lot of stuff. And when things go wrong with our brains, we run into a whole bunch of problems that, we might experience common mental health problems, things like depression or anxiety or PTSD, or struggling with an addiction problems. We might experience very severe mental illnesses, things like severe autism or schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. As we get on in our years, we might have that brain breaking down in different ways. We have a host of neurodegenerative diseases that are essentially the brain is starting to fail us. And that leads to things called the things like dementia. The one that people know the most is Alzheimer's. And I put a couple of pictures of people on the right side here that many of you will recognize. And that's just to make the point is, this isn't something that happens to other people somewhere else. This is something that happens to all of us. And the other reason I put those people up there is you can do very well living with a brain, that is not your typical brain. And even when our brains are challenged, there's a lot we can do to help people lead good lives. So I think that's what we're up against. So what is the cost of all of this problems that can happen to our brain? Well, first of all, as Tim said, this is not something uncommon. Mental health and addiction problems will affect nearly half of the world's population at some point over their lifespan. At any given time in the state of Washington, there is 1 million people who live right now with a diagnosable mental health or addiction problem. And the other thing that's different about these diseases from other diseases is they come at you very early. 50% of the people who will live with a major mental health or addiction problem will have presented with that by the time they're 14 years old. 75% of us who will live with a mental health or addiction problem, it'll have come at us by the time we're 24 years old. That's what makes this very different from some other chronic diseases, things like heart disease, things like cancer. Most of that shows up at the end of your life. But because these things come at us very early, the cumulative burden, the impact it has on our lives is really tremendous. So this is, as Tim said, a leading cause of disability. There's 5 times more disability caused by things that are going wrong in your brain than by things like diabetes or heart disease. There's 15 times more disability over your lifespan caused by mental health and brain health problems than by cancer. Now, you might say, how is this possible? Cancer is a terrible illness. It could even kill me. And the big difference is cancer might come at you when you're in your 70s or 80s. And then it can have a pretty big impact on you, but it might be treated and then you go on with your life. If it comes at you and it has a lasting impact on you when you're 14 years old, that's what's creating the enormous burden that comes with these diseases. But it's not just disability, it's a big driver of mortality. We have in the US now somebody who has a death from suicide or drug overdose about every 5 minutes. There are more people who die from mental health and addiction problems in this country every year than all the people who die from car accidents. There are more people who die from mental health or addiction problems in this country than all of the Americans who died during the period of all the Americans who died in the Vietnam War, over all the years of the Vietnam War. These are not small numbers. And in terms of the finances, there are tremendous financial costs that come with these problems. Our employers are feeling this in different ways. They are saying people are not at work, when they're struggling with a mental health addiction problem, or maybe they are at work and everybody wishes they weren't at work. That's what's called presenteeism. So absenteeism is you're not at work. Presenteeism is you're at work, and you feel, and everybody else feels like it'd be better if you weren't at work because everybody is struggling. It causes reduced productivity. It causes a tremendous amount of healthcare costs. Our governments, I think, feel this in different ways. They're struggling with supporting people who are struggling with disability, with homelessness, people who are involved with our criminal justice system. And that's the cumulative burden that these diseases bring to us. This is the data that Tim mentioned from our Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation. These are some of the smartest people in the world that we have here at the University of Washington. And what they do is they measure how much impact all of the different diseases that exist in the world have on human beings at any given time. And every year they publish estimates about what is the thing that causes the most disability for all of us in our lives. So they publish a metric called years lived with disability. And what's on this slide is, and you can't read all the little things, but what's on this slide is every single disease that we have a diagnosis for that we can track. And this is what's causing disability in America right now. And I outlined in red 3 areas. There is mental health problems, dementias, and then for people who are having problems with alcohol and drugs. The cumulative disability from that set of problems is bigger than any other single group of diseases that we have. So it's an enormous, enormous burden. And that's what we're taking a run at with this institute. That's our mission. The mission is to improve the health for millions of people who are affected by mental health, substance use, and other brain health disorders. And that's not a small task. And there isn't one single way to try to go about that. So we have taken a whole bunch of approaches to that. I'm going to summarize some of them. You have the report that goes into a little bit more detail. The way we organize this report, and that's what I'm going to try to do this morning, is we're going to talk about people. I think people are always the single most investment we can make. Programs, places, and policy. And that's how I'll try to organize some of the comments here this morning. First of all, as Tim said, the Institute has allowed us to provide support, to recruit, to support some very, very accomplished people who are true experts in their work, locally, regionally, nationally, and internationally recognized experts. And with the support that these endowments can give them, they help us lead different aspects of the work that the Institute can do. We have several of our endowed professors here with us today. If you want to just say hello. I see Tom, I see Rebecca. Okay, welcome to all of you. Thank you for what you do. And I think Marco is in a study section. Some of the study sections are still, oh, he's back there. But I know you're wired in. You're probably on a study section somewhere, right? All right. Okay. And we have a couple of new faculty searches that are supported by the Institute. This year, we're going to do recruitments for 2 new endowed chairs and professorships. The first one is an endowed professorship for a leading experts in addiction medicine. That's something I think that would really help strengthen what we do here. We are about to launch that recruitment. We have a hiring freeze right now at UW Medicine for all the right reasons. So it'll be, a little bit delayed, but I think that's my goal, that we really recruit a fabulous person to join us in that area. We have another wonderful opportunity, and that comes from an endowment that is supported by a wonderful gift from some former faculty and alumni, Warner Shai and Sherry Willis, and that is to recruit a faculty member who will have an endowed chair in the area of cognitive aging. So what happens when our brains get older? And I'm looking forward to starting that recruitment. And we're also going to do some recruitments of some more early career clinician scientists in 3 areas that I think are really important for us right now. One of them is to build on the strengths we already have in the area of neuromodulation and interventional psychiatry. The other one will be to recruit somebody who can help us move some of what we are discovering we can do with artificial intelligence into the clinic. So we have people who are doing really fabulous research in this area, but translating that research into what you actually do with a patient in a clinic, I think takes a unique set of skills, and that's something I'm going to invest in this year. And then the third area we're going to invest in this year, and I'll say a bit more about that later on, is a work at the interface of mental health and the law. There's a lot that happens at the interface between the law and mental health. Many of the people who are living with serious mental illness, their first contact is not with a mental health professional, but it's with a law enforcement person. And I think there we have a lot of opportunities to say, is there things that we can do that would work much better than what we do now? So I think that's an area we're going to invest in this year. Speaking of investing in clinician scientists, this is another area that we have put a fair amount of emphasis on. We have some really smart researchers here at the university. We have some really good clinicians. And what I need is, I think we need to support a couple more people who are a little bit of both. Because when we have really smart clinicians and really smart scientists talk to each other, sometimes there are some translation challenges. When we have clinicians who are also trained as scientists, they can be fabulous translators to help us really bridge and move things from the lab into the clinic a little bit more effectively. And so what we've done is we've started a program with support from the Institute called the Clinician Scientist Training Program. Jesse Fan, who's one of our endowed professors, leads that program. And what we've done is we've started to give awards to early career residents, psychology interns, postdoctoral fellows who are partnering with a more senior mentor to really develop as clinician scientists. And we've made 19 of these awards. We have a third round of funding that's going to be announced next month. And I think that's really investing very early on in the next generation of people who can take the work of this institute forward. We have, as Tim mentioned, we started a new fellowship program. We have physicians here who are trained as neurologists. We have physicians here who are trained as psychiatrists. We both care about the brain, but we think about the brain a little bit differently. We approach it a little bit differently. We use slightly different techniques. And I think there is a tremendous opportunity for us to sort of come together and work at that interface. So we've started a new fellowship training program that is open to both psychiatrists and neurologists. We have a program director, Michael Schrift, who is a psychiatrist, and a co-program director, Mike Personer, who is a neurologist. And we've recruited our first 2 fellows, Kalania and Sung, and they're both, Kalania is a psychiatrist, Sung is a neurologist, and they're working together in clinic, learning how to work at that interface, how to really think about becoming brain health doctors. And that's something I think is very exciting, and hopefully something we can really grow over the next couple of years. As Tim mentioned, we also have gotten involved with, real treatment. So when we opened our new Center for Behavioral Health and Learning at the UWMC Northwest campus this year in April, last year in April, and that's a wonderful opportunity. The state gave us almost $250 million to build a beautiful new facility. And we said we want in that facility state-of-the-art technology to help provide some treatments that are really not available anywhere else in our community. And that's where the Institute invested and we built the Garvey Institute Center for Neuromodulation. So we have on the bottom floor of that building a wonderful, really state-of-the-art suite of, treatment capacity where we can help people with really serious mental illness who have not benefited from things like medication treatments or psychotherapy. We can give them things like electroconvulsive therapy, transcranial magnetic stimulation, and I think there's a whole range of other treatments that are coming down the pike, other ways of stimulating that neurocircuitry that I talked about, some infusion therapies that I think have tremendous potential, and we now have a facility where we're able to test those treatments and use those treatments, and we're already providing those treatments every day. Randall Espinoza, who we recruited from UCLA, who helps lead that center, is not here today because he's up there doing treatment. So it's really, really nice to have this new facility that helps us blend top-notch clinical care and research. We started a couple of other research programs. A few of them I mentioned last year. One of them is Center for Novel Therapeutics in Addiction Psychiatry. Nathan Sackett runs that program, and he's got funding from the state of Washington to do a trial, a very careful, thoughtful trial of using psilocybin, which is a psychedelic substance that occurs in a mushroom naturally out in the world, in using it along with very good psychotherapy to treat things like PTSD. And we actually starting this month to enroll the first participants in that trial. And I think we can learn a lot from that. The other one is the center that Marco leads. Marco's sitting in the back row there, which is our Center for Medication Development for Substance Use Disorder and Overdose. Some very, very interesting work using vaccines, using small molecules to say, can we help people who are at risk for addiction problems or who are experiencing addiction problems with a vaccine? A very different approach to trying to help a person like that than all of the traditional approaches that we've had so far. And I think when you read in the report, Marco said they gave the first vaccine to a human being, I think in 2020, you guys did, right? Is that right? So it's not just in the lab anymore. We're actually starting to try these things in real humans, and I think it has a tremendous amount of potential. So I'm very glad that we were able to support some of that work. Tim mentioned also the Family and Caregiver Training and Support Program. That's a wonderful program that Molly Forrester, who was talking about that program here last year. She's not with us today. She has her own family health emergency to take care of on the East Coast, and we wish her well. But she's helped us put together, I think, what is a pretty sophisticated effort to recognize the fact that when somebody brings us a patient and we take good care of that patient, in one of our inpatient or outpatient programs, oftentimes we don't pay much attention to the family. And we've had too many times where, we've taken really good care of a patient, maybe somebody who has schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, and they come to us and we take care of them in the hospital. And there comes a day when the family comes and picks that patient back up and they say to me something like, now what do you do? Now what do we do? You've taken good care of that person and now it's on me and I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. I don't have the skills to really help this person. And that's, I think, what we want to do with this program. So how do we help not just treat the patient, but actually give some tools, give some skills, give some support to family members and other loved ones that are in the patient's life. So we're starting that program. We're starting to offer some things online. We are going to be offering some things for people who are in treatment at our Center for Behavioral Health and Learning. And as that program grows and succeeds, I hope to be able to offer it throughout our healthcare system. I think, and if we can make it work well in mental health, I think that kind of idea has some benefit, some potential benefit for other parts of healthcare too. So I'm pretty excited about this. Tim mentioned the fact that we are doing a whole bunch of grant giving out of the Institute. This is probably the thing that we've invested the most effort in so far, which is to give grants to some of you to take a novel idea that could have a huge impact on brain health, that could have an impact at a population level, and that could be translated into real healthcare. We've given many of you, we've given 58 of you $100,000 to take an idea like that and show us what could you do if that idea worked out. You could say these ideas are sort of a little bit like venture capital funding. They're not all going to work out. I just need I need enough of them to work out so we can look back on it and say, we invested in the right things and we really are making a difference. So far, we have done 58 of these grants. There are 154 of you who are recipients of these grants, who are working on these grants. And as Tim said, these grants are, they're all over the university. It's not just in medicine. It's not just in our department. There are 3 campuses, 11 schools, 25 departments that are working on some of these grants. And I think that's good because I think there isn't going to be any one answer that somebody in a lab is going to come up with that's going to cure all mental health and addiction problems. It's going to take a whole bunch of different people who have different approaches, who come together, who find each other, who are going to say, we're going to solve one of these problems. And I'm very, very excited about all of the work you're doing. This is something you obviously can't read. This is just a list of every one of these grants. Every one of these, we have a description of what the project is, of what you're working on our website. And if you like to learn more about that, you're welcome to look at that. It's on the Garvey Institute website. The most important thing I would say is it's given us an opportunity to engage a whole bunch of really neat, really wonderful people. Many of you are here. Some of you are online today. And I want to thank you all for the creativity, the effort, all of the work you're putting in to try to move some of these ideas forward. If you have the time, we invited a couple of you to present in innovation stations over lunch here. So for those of you, those are some of our investigators. If you'd like to meet them, stop by their poster over lunch, chat with them, and you'll get a little bit of a sense of what these innovation projects, these innovation grants really are like. What I would say is, so far, I'm really pleased. I think we're seeing these early grants having a tremendous impact. We have a whole bunch of neat publications in scientific journals. That's what gets people in science excited and promoted, but that's not what's making a real difference in the world. I think we have seen conference presentations. We've seen a whole bunch of applications for new grants. And I think that from a pure investment perspective, my best guess is we've put about $4.5 million into these 58 grants, and we are already seeing about $30 million in additional funding that's come out of that investment, federal funding, other kind of private funding, a couple of cases where there's been some private equity funding. And I think that even from a purely financial perspective, I'm pretty pleased with saying, we could 5x what we've done so far. So, what about the impact that these projects are having? Again, it's hard for me in a short time this morning to tell the story of every one of these 58 projects. I'll call out 2 of them. One of them is a really neat project that Dr. Kimi Domoto-Riley is doing at this interface of brain health, mental health, and the law. What she says is she works with patients who have dementia, who have who have brains that are failing them. And she says, when a person like that is alone or doesn't have the kind of support they need and they're out in trouble, oftentimes it's really the police that get called or some first responder that's get called. And those folks really don't know how to work with a person like that. They're not trained for that. And so she's done a really, really wonderful project working with Washington law enforcement to try to say, what do we need to do to help them have the skills to work with a person, who are struggling with a cognitive impairment. They've developed some really, really neat training materials. They've done some training. And I think that's something we can build on because that's something where we won't turn a police officer into a social worker or a nurse or a doctor. But we can think about what is it that they could have and what could we do, those of us who are working in the mental health field, to help them when they're out in the field with somebody to be much more effective than what we do now. I think that's a really, really nice example of work at this interface of mental health and the law. The other one on the right side, we're going to hear more about, that is a project that Tim Althoff, who is in our School of Computer Science and Engineering, is doing, which is to say, could you have psychotherapy from a computer? Now, for some of you, that's going to like send up a whole bunch of red flags. That sounds kind of scary. And what Tim will say, and I'll be interesting to see what he says when he comes, he says people are already doing it. People are, they're stressed out. They're struggling with stuff. They're on their own. They don't know who to talk to. They're talking to ChatGPT about what they should do about things in their life. That's not working terribly well. You might get all kinds of sort of scary and crazy advice, but there are people like Tim who've started to make some really, really thoughtful, really serious investments in saying, what if you paired a human with a computer? Could a computer help us practice certain things? I think there is tremendous potential that we have that we didn't even have 2 years ago. I think the technology 2 years ago wasn't there. I think right now we might be at a point where you really can, partner a human with a computer and do some really, really good work. And I feel like that's an area we are going to more seriously explore and investigate. So I think I went a little faster than I needed to. We have time for some questions. Any thoughts, any reactions to what we've heard so far? Anybody want to call out anything? Hey, Ken. All right. So what's been the biggest lesson so far? I guess what I would say is we knew we had a lot of really, really smart people here. We have people who can sort of know the brain really well. We have people who understand, the literally the physiology, the anatomy of what's inside the brain. We have people who are out in the field, talking to a police person who is struggling with somebody who doesn't have the brain. We have people in the middle who are in clinic, putting it all together. So when a human being is struggling with this, to have the right experience, that's the hard part. We have a lot of really smart people, but connecting all the dots in such a way that when you're struggling, when you're in that situation, does that person you're going to talk to know what they need to know? How do they connect with somebody else who they need to know? So putting all the pieces together to make a really good run at that has been pretty challenging, I would say. It's not surprising to me, but we have a huge university with a ton of experts and everybody knows their thing really, really well, but somebody's got to connect all the dots. And I think as I see these 58 projects, some of them have done that really, really well. Some of them are still sort of stuck in a kind of a silo mode where they're sort of just mining one part of the puzzle, and we haven't put all the dots together. So I think we have started to make some inroads in. I think because we've invested pretty broadly, it will at some point come together. And I think that's the opportunity we have. How do we take all of that human capital, all these smart brains we have, and take all of this and put it together so we either can prevent the next person struggling with a brain health problem, or we can help in a way that we really aren't very good at that today. I don't know, is that making any sense at all? So it's really a challenge of taking all that knowledge, connecting all the dots, making it so when I'm in clinic with somebody, I can actually do something that's really, really different. It's not as simple as some new treatment, some new pill, some new something. You have to bring that pill to the person who needs it at the right time. There's a lot of things that have to happen to make that really work. Other thoughts or reactions to that? That's my challenge to those of you who are working on your projects. Think about how is this going to help the person in your family, the person in your clinic when they show up. Because I think a lot of us are producing partial answers to that, but we haven't fully connected all the dots yet. And I think that's our opportunity here. Becky. Yeah, so the fact that an institute like this can buy a piece of time from a person who is really smart to just think, to work, to connect with other people, that's actually huge. And that's what we're using our endowed professorships for. That's what we're using the clinician, the support for early career clinicians for. Most of us are in a situation where we're in clinic seeing patients all day. You know, you don't have the time to think. You're just running from one thing to the next, or you're in a lab, you're doing the thing that your grant has funded you to do. And we don't have the freedom really to sort of take a step back and say, wait, what does this all fit? How does this add up? How do I connect this to the next thing? So having the ability to take some of you and buy a piece of your time and say, use that time to think, to connect, to talk to other people, that's actually been a tremendous value. Yeah. Other thoughts, questions? Anybody want to share about what those of you who have projects that are funded by the Institute, or maybe some of our endowed professors, anybody want to share what it's meant for you to have that support? A very shy group. Hey, Rick. Maybe introduce yourself. Thank you. So that's a really nice example of, I would say there's 2 or 3 strands of the work that we're doing. One of them is just investing in promising new people, helping them think about, I can tell them what the last 30 years looked like. They're going to have to define what the next 30 years look like, right? Helping them have the tools, have the inspiration, have the ideas about doing something that's different. I think that's one area. The second area is literally coming up with new treatments. I think some of what we're going to hear from Tim is we really are thinking with those guys about, it's very hard for us to scale what a smart psychologist does. We have a relatively small number of them, and there's no way we're ever going to reach 1 million people in the state of Washington with what a handful of people can do. But if we pair those people with some really smart computers, we might be able to reach a lot more people. We might be able to engage people who normally wouldn't come into a psychologist's office. We might be able to take that psychologist and help them help a lot more people. So that's really new treatment development. And then the third one, I think, is what you are speaking to, Rick, which is, it's true. A lot of the stuff that we discover in our labs, we publish them. It helps us become a professor. It helps us get promoted. It's good for our careers, but it may not be helping somebody in clinic. A lot of that stuff never really gets put to use. And I think Some of what we've done with the Institute funding is to help with what I call translation, which is how do I translate that, from having a paper in a scientific journal to being able to help somebody in a clinic. So I think that's a really good example of that. Okay, Dror. Mhm.
So even our ability to get the data to help prune off programs of research that actually are not viable is really, really helpful because we redirect the resources and the energy and the personnel into the programs of research that are actually have greater real world potential. So sometimes the breakthroughs come in the form of teaching you that your idea is not a particularly viable idea outside of the sterile research environment. And so now really
Yes.
we've repositioned how we approach the intervention.
Yeah. So those of you who have challenged to do that kind of translating, you have an idea, it works in your lab, it works in your head, and then you get it to work in your lab, but does it really work for the average person and the average clinician out in the real world, right? Some of you have, you have learned something, and I think it's great. If you take $100,000 and you find out that that idea doesn't work, that's okay, as long as we learn something from it, as long as we make change with it. And I think I've seen a lot of really great examples of that too. So thank you for that. Yes. And now we have a mic and you can introduce yourself.
Hi, Mandy Owens with the Addictions, Drug and Alcohol Institute. We are in the final stages of our project funded through one of these grants, and I really appreciate how timely they were. We're looking at the feasibility of a support group for family members of people with opioid use disorder, and all these efforts out there around fentanyl. It is happening so quickly, and I think often these folks haven't gotten the kind of support that they've been wanting and so desperately needing. And so just wanted to share that some of those things that we've been hearing from family members, doing some of those recruitment, those interviews, and then now running the group, the number of folks who say, I don't even need a gift card to do this. I just want to help you all. I want to help Harborview. I want to help all of the folks who are trying to do these efforts because they're so desperately needed. And I think especially for folks, family members of people struggling with opioid use disorder, they often feel so alone and isolated. And like everything that they are doing is wrong, and they hear from the community, tough love, or just break it off. And what about for the folks who don't want that? So we're looking at an existing evidence-based treatment called CRAFT, Community Reinforcement and Family Training, that gives folks skills. And how can we deliver that in settings like Harborview to reach those folks who so desperately want it? So very appreciative of it, and I know our participants are as well.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Okay.
Hi, I'm Andrea Stocco, the professor in psychology, and I was lucky to be one of the earliest awardees of
I
this.
think you were in the
Garvey.
first cycle, right?
I was in the first cycle.
All right. So now you can tell us what you did.
Yeah, and I'm gonna tell you what we did, and also how it changed my life and all the people involved. So 4 years ago, I have been collaborating with Tom Grabowski here, and we have been discussing for years actually that it's really great to study dementia, but we're really bad at measuring how bad a person's memory declines. And I'm a computational neuroscientist, and we're toying with the idea maybe we're measuring the wrong way. Maybe we can use a model to measure. And when the Garvey call came out, Tom and I decided we're going to do it. This is the opportunity that we have because nobody's going to fund this. So we built a completely different way to assess memory decline that is based on essentially having you do a simple game, but behind the scenes, there is actually a computer model that simulates your responses, and it keeps doing you and asking you how well you remember something until it gets you perfectly right. It can estimate how well you remember and how long it will take you to, forget or to give a response. And then we use the parameters of the model to tell you, well, to actually estimate a person's memory. And this has been absurdly successful. We didn't expect it to work at all. We were going to say try, and then we decided that actually, when we look at the data, it was actually more accurate than, for instance, the Mocha test, telling us whether a person has dementia. Now, how did this change my life? Well, it kind of derailed it in the most positive way because people start asking us, well, can we use the software? Can we use the software? And right now the software is used at UW, the DRC is using it. Randall Espinosa has tried to use it at the Garvey Institute for Neuromodulation. But all of a sudden we got requests from people like in Minnesota, in New York, at Dartmouth College, in Germany, in the Netherlands, in France. And at some point we decided we couldn't just keep spending all this time just fixing software, and we actually had to create a spin-off company to supply this product to all these clinicians all around the world. And we're just collecting data right now from literally at this point, thousands and thousands of people. And we have something that we plan now with a new grant to give to Washingtonians in rural Washington so they can test their memory on the phone and be alerted when the memory is going off the rail. This has been like an absurd, for me, story of how like something that was like let's risk it, let's try to do something that was different and see if it works, ended up like completely like taking over my scientific life for the past 4 years in the most positive way possible. So thank you so much.
Well, you're welcome, and thank you for sharing. And I'm glad that you said you didn't think it was going to work. I'm glad it worked. And yeah, and you spinning up a company from it. So there you go. All right. Okay. Any other thoughts? Anybody else want to share an experience? Okay. How about I'm going to put somebody on the spot who I didn't tell to prepare for this. One of our newer endowed professors is Rebecca. Do you want to say a word about what you do and what this means for you? And what it might mean right now, because you have, as many of our scientists have, a whole bunch of worries right now in the short run.
Yeah, I was actually trying to think what I would say, and there were so many different thoughts, all kind of chaotic, that I had trouble coming up with something. So I guess there's a couple areas. So it's been less than a year in the endowed position. It was a really big deal for us. So I'm based at the VA, but faculty at University of Washington, and we were trying to figure out how it would work in a VA position. And a lot of what the endowment allows me to do is have some funds that I can spend to support staffing and projects that otherwise I wouldn't be able to pay for. So I can support trainee projects with a little bit, if I can add a marker or a cognitive testing to an existing project that I wouldn't be able to pay for in another way. I can support that here. I can create a little bit of room for example, I have somebody who joined as a research assistant straight out of his undergrad, did a fantastic job, became excellent very rapidly at doing analyses. And I can give a little bit of time for him as he's moved up to start writing publications and go to a conference and present them. He's on his second paper now that he's putting together, and he's been able to advance areas in our research group that we otherwise wouldn't be able to. So we're looking at things like how interactions between traumatic stress and physiologic stressors can together affect both cognitive functioning and psychiatric symptom burden and somatic symptoms, and how those interplay and sort of can have bidirectional effects, and how we can treat people's experiences kind of more holistically, understanding what people's experiences are and what's most important to focus on. And it's a very hard area to fund because there's not a single review panel exactly. People don't know where to send our grants sometimes. But it has allowed us to really push those edges, bring in more trainees, and support kind of integrating, working with neurology colleagues, folks in endocrine, and how to look at areas we wouldn't otherwise be able to look at. So the last piece is, in this current funding climate, it has actually been really important. It's part of what's letting our staff stay salaried when otherwise federal structures are a little bit less stable. So I have been immensely grateful more times than I can say over the past year, but these past months and weeks especially.
Thank you. So, and again, I think maybe this goes a little bit back to what Ken was asking me. One of the things we can do with this kind of support, with this kind of funding is to work at interfaces. You know, funding, labs, funding is all a bit siloed. You know, we have 20 some, 30 some institutes at the National Institute of Health. Everybody has their bucket that they fund, the diseases that they're in and other diseases that they're not in. But our brains and our lives aren't quite like that. They don't fall neatly into silos. I think one of the things we can do with this kind of funding is to connect those silos, to get people from different silos to talk to each other, to work with each other. And I think that's a really nice example of that. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Any other thoughts, questions? Yep.
Me?
Yes.
There you go. I'll be another example of that, sort of working at an interface. I'm an intensive care unit doctor at Harborview. And so there, especially in a county hospital on any given day in the ICU, I'd estimate like half of the people there are ultimately there because of complications of substance use disorder. And so for my NIH funded research, I'm evaluating how we can better treat alcohol withdrawal in safer ways that would allow people to have the brain function during a hospital stay to really sort of think about their next steps in treating their underlying disorder. There's a huge void that just exists when we think about the experience of the person when they end up in the hospital after a car accident or with a serious infection. Are we meeting them there to sort of capitalize on that moment and use that to help them address their fundamental problem? And the answer to that question right now is no. In the hospital, we're really not doing enough. And so the Garvey funding is really allowing me to work on something, in real time that I know is a need for patients. At a minimum, we should be doing shared decision making about their treatment options. And that's sort of, a side observation to sort of my managing alcohol withdrawal issue, but it helps me sleep at night to know at a minimum, we're going to start to try to address that now with Garvey funds while we kind of tackle some of the NIH funded questions as well.
Thank you. So I think that's another really nice example of the value when we bring people who are good researchers, good scientists, and people who are good clinicians, and some of you are both, together, because it keeps things real. It keeps things from just an idea in someone's head, maybe an idea in the lab, to saying, how would that help the person I'm seeing in the ICU at Harborview every day? I think that's one of the great advantages. That's what I say to the people I try to recruit here. I say, you can do great research here, but you're going to be able to do that down the hall from somebody who's taking care of patients every day. And if the two of you can work together, we can really, really make something great happen. I think that's, Tim, I think that's right. That's what we have to offer. As an institution that's really a world leading institution that does all three things. We do the best we can today to take care of that person who is with you in the ICU at Harborview. We also do the best we can to try to say 10 years from now, we're still going to be doing the same thing, or we're going to be doing something different. What does better look like? And then we have to take the next generation of people who are going to come after us and say, how do we inspire them? How do we give them the tools to take that, what's going to come 10 years from now, and to make that real? It might not be us doing it, but it's that next generation. I think one of the things we can do, I think in a big academic healthcare system, is to be able to do all three of those things, to connect all those dots. And I think that's really, really neat when you see it happen. All right. Why don't we take a little break? Let's come back here at 11 o'clock with Tim. There's some coffee upstairs, catch up with each other, chat, and then we'll be back here at 11 o'clock and we'll talk about artificial intelligence. Thank you all. Okay, the two mics are not gonna like. All right, as we get going, I'm gonna introduce Tim Althoff. Tim is a colleague who works in our Allen School of Computer Science and Engineering. He's an associate professor, and he was one of the earlier Garvey Institute grantees, and we've gotten to know Tim, and I think he's a very cool, very inspirational person. I've met a lot of people who are in that space that he works in, who all they talk to me about is their thing is when they're going to spin out something and make a lot of money. Tim talked to me about helping people, and I thought, wow, that's kind of interesting. He talked to me about how many people can I help, and I thought, wow, that's really interesting. Okay. And then he started talking to us about the fact that he thought maybe a computer could do some of what we were doing, and that's always threatening to a clinician. So we thought, Jesus, this guy's going to try to eat our lunch. But then I sort of took a step back and I thought, wait, I got to remember there's so much lunch. Nobody will ever eat our lunch. So there is a lot of lunch. And actually in about a half hour, we'll have lunch out here. But I sort of started thinking, okay. And then I challenged him a little bit. I said, what about all the downsides of, turning everything over to a computer? And he was very thoughtful about that too. And then he brought us a grant that said he wants to study what are the risks, that come when people start talking to computers. I was very impressed. So I invited Tim to chat with me here today to talk about what do we really think is the potential? I'm not a computer scientist. I'm not an engineer. My math skills are too limited to do that. I learned that early on in life. But I'm an early adopter of technology. When I came to the University of Washington a little over 30 years ago, I was a fellow here. And I got to talking to some people who had a grant from, I don't know, some federal agency to try to do telehealth support. And I thought that was really neat. So we rigged up a project where I had a clinic on Tuesday afternoons that was like any other psychiatry clinic, except for the clinic. I was here and the clinic was in a little town called Driggs, Idaho. Now, Driggs, if you know Driggs, is a beautiful little town in the eastern part of Idaho. And it was in a family practice with 2 doctors and a nurse. I was their psychiatrist on Tuesday afternoons, and they would schedule patients for me, and I would do whatever I would do here. And today, that's an everyday thing. We're all doing Zoom. We're doing a ton of telehealth. I think we did 50,000 telehealth visits last year. But 30 years ago, it was crazy. It was like Back to the Future kind of stuff. And the technology was pretty lousy. I mean, we had the phone line as for the audio, and we had a separate dedicated called the T1 line for the video signal, and they weren't perfectly synchronized. So there was about just a little bit less than a 1 second lag between what the sound that came first and the picture that came after. And it's interesting how the human brain needs to be perfectly synchronized like that, because I would say something to a person in Driggs, Idaho, and I'd make a joke, and the person would just sit there. And that was really kind of like unsettling. And then I'd go on kind of rattled, and then he'd start smiling, and I'm like, okay, that's not working very well. But having said that, we did a lot of great therapy. It was fun working with these guys. I got to know their patients. And so I'm an early adopter of technology. I'm just not a technologist. So, now we're at a time where 10 years ago, I started thinking, a lot of what we do when we see a person who has depression, we have to teach them how to think. We have to teach them how to maybe think a little different about things. When I was training, we were learning something called cognitive behavioral therapy. And it's basically a way of helping a person who's depressed, who's having a lot of negative thoughts, sort of challenge their own thoughts, challenge their own assumptions. So when they think everything is terrible, nobody likes me, I'm going to fail at everything, you say, is it really true? Is it everything? Is nobody likes you? Is there anybody who likes you? And it starts sort of making them think like, wait, maybe I need to think a little bit differently about this thing. And then we said, we can do these sessions and it seems to work pretty well, but it's very hard because there's only a few of us, and how many of these sessions could we really do? So there was a guy who wrote a book, forgot the name of it, but basically it was sort of like a little manual that you would give to the patient to sort of do that work on their own when they go home. continued the cognitive therapy by reading this book. But it turned out I still have the book on my shelf. It's called Feeling Good. And some of you probably have seen it. If you're old enough, you might have seen it. And it's a book that's a little paperback that I would give to my patients, and it had 300 pages. And I thought to myself, one of my patients came back and he said, if I could read this from cover to cover and fix myself with it, I wouldn't need to be in your office. Who can read 300 pages of small print, right? And so now I'm thinking, okay, but a computer might be able to do that. If I have a good relationship with a patient and I get them started on something, maybe they can work with a computer. Maybe a computer could do it by themselves. So I'm open to that. But I also think there are some serious risks. There was a great article, nice little paper, nice little piece in the New York Times a week or two ago. They talked about all of the risks of when people just talk to computers. Computers might give you some bad advice, and there were some very sad stories there about young people, taking their life doing some things because of interactions they had with computers. So I think we are now at a place where the technology really is at a place where we could, make something happen. But how do we do it in a way that helps a lot of people and not harm too many people? So Tim, welcome. Let's have a seat here. And where'd my microphone go? Let's have a little chat about this. Okay, so I put a couple of questions up here. I'll put them up here for you too, and I'll ask you them. So you're a computer scientist, Tim, and what got you interested in working on mental health stuff? Why would you do that?
Yeah, I'll first start that this is a bit awkward with the eating your lunch, since I was hoping to stay for lunch, and I'm really honored to spend all this time with everybody here.
No, I will just say, if you manage to eat all of our lunch, we are actually going to be really happy, because that means you helped a lot of people and you solved that challenge that we're taking on. I invite you to do that.
Yes, so it's true that my training is in computer science, but or interested. Exciting opportunity to use computing for a meaningful purpose. And I think, as I know came up several times, there's significant access issues, including in mental health. There are scaling issues, and I believe we're going to get into it, but at least kind of scaling is something that computers can help with. If you can do something once, you might be able to do it many, many times cheaply. So if that's something meaningful, that might help scaling.
Okay. Tell us just a little bit about what you've done, what your team does in this area.
Yeah. Building different forms of mental health interventions that are supported by AI. Human AI interaction and how we can leverage that to improve people's mental health. And in that world, we often develop, evaluate, and deploy interventions. Jürgen mentioned CBT and helping people challenge negative thoughts. That's kind of one example that we did recently, where based on, that's actually something that I find super attractive about clinical psychology. It's actually highly algorithmic. Kind of whenever clinical psychologists have thought about how to help an individual or a clinician or kind of people at various levels of training deliver mental health interventions, it's often kind of very process based and algorithmic. So I actually find it a fairly natural connection to computing. Recent example, we build an online tool that's freely available to anybody. Ooh, is this cutting out every now and then? Yeah. Okay. That can help you challenge your negative thought and to help you teach that skill of challenging your negative thoughts and recognizing patterns. And for example, this was a tool that is now available to everybody. We've had about 160,000 people use it, and we could deliver kind of that skill building experience, which is kind of fairly narrow and doesn't take anybody's lunch away, but we can deliver that for kind of a few cents per use max, and I don't know, maybe for fractions of a cent next year. So those are kind of some of the things we do.
So just if you think about that, right, it would take us a career and a half or two to help 100,000 people do cognitive therapy, right? And you know, if what you're saying is true, you could do that for a couple cents a piece and help, you know, 100,000 plus people. You've already had over 100,000 people use that. That is pretty mind-boggling, right? Okay. How do you think a computer can help us? Say a little bit more about this scaling. How does it help us? How and why does it help us reach and help more people who need help?
Mm-hmm. And I might get a little bit into kind of what are computers good at or not so good at. I think one important piece is really scale, and I think about it in mental health care as lifting the floor. The floor tends to be quite low, where most people just don't have access to anything. And I think there's kind of a basic form of care that could be delivered or at least assisted with computers to make care a lot more accessible. So that's kind of the scale piece, that if we can do something once with the machine, we can repeat this many, many times at kind of extremely low cost. That's not shockingly different from say a printing press. That was also something that helped scale something, and that's maybe one reason why we now have there's books we can learn about CBT, there's workbooks, there's worksheets, and then we can disseminate them in many ways. But I think relative to that, I think computing has some benefits where these books or worksheets, they're static. They don't listen to you. They don't respond to you. They don't add more kind of support and scaffolding when needed. It's kind of very, very static. It's not interactive. It's not dynamic. And I think that's where there's at least a great opportunity to use computers, artificial intelligence, also in mental health care, to adapt to the needs of the individual, kind of to the person in front of you, to their actual needs where they are right now, to their barriers in ways that kind of pre-scripted books or worksheets that have been thought out in kind of great detail and have lots of great utility, but they can't adapt on the spot. They have to be this kind of one-size-fits-all solution. They kind of can't adapt to the person in front of them. So this kind of adaptability, this opportunity for personalization, I think is a key part that will help this computing technology kind of add something that books, worksheets couldn't add, and that maybe also helps with higher engagement with mental health care, which tends to be a challenging thing in the digital space.
Yeah, I think that has gotten a lot better. 30 years ago, when I got into this field, there was so much more stigma. People really were struggling about this notion about there's something wrong with me. I'm gonna have to talk to somebody. That has gotten a lot better. But I think we're still challenged with reaching people. There are still some people who are uncomfortable with that. They're much more comfortable with logging onto a computer, even people with really serious mental illness. I encounter a good number of people who, when we first see them in clinic, they've already been on the internet. They've already said, what is schizophrenia? What is bipolar disorder? What is depression? What do I do about it? So I feel like it's a great entry point. And in terms of the personalizing things, like I said, I was giving everybody this book, Feeling Good, and they looked at it and say, okay, I don't know if anybody read it past the first 5 pages, because when you're seriously depressed and your brain's not working, you're not able to pick up a 300-page book and just crank through it and fix it. But you might be able to engage with a computer, and if it asks you some interesting questions and it remembers some of what you said before, it might be a little bit more engaging, right, than just a dry book like that.
Absolutely. And kind of why do those books have so many pages? right? Like for instance, with the example of I know learning to challenge your negative thoughts, cognitive reframing. I don't like relevant chapters would, for instance, include what are all the types of cognitive distortions, what are all the patterns that are here. Let's learn about all of them, depending on who you ask. I know there's at least 10 to 20 of them. Some are better differentiated from others, and in the moment when somebody kind of has a need to interact with this, they don't necessarily need to kind of learn about all of them on the spot. So there's also kind of really opportunities by understanding where this person is coming from to kind of get it in less than a couple hundred pages. Or for instance, this tool I mentioned, I know maybe on average it takes people, I know 3, 4, 5, 6 minutes to use. And it, like the truth is, it doesn't teach you everything in that book. It really doesn't. Hopefully it gets close to at least a chapter if you use it multiple times. But what it does is it, for instance, recognizes certain patterns in your negative thoughts and helps kind of uses this as a moment for skill building and education, to teach you about maybe the more likely cognitive distortions that are going on right now. And we get to skip a couple pages. And if we couple minutes to interact, we can actually leverage that. So that's kind of how these tools can be adaptive in engagement.
Okay. Are you giving us a new mic? All right. So otherwise, I'm going to give Tim mine. Mine seems to work okay. Is that going to work? How about you take mine?
Machines are the solution. No,
Okay, that's the solution. We got to be adaptable. All right. Okay. So we talked a little bit about what a computer might do to engage a person, to help a person. One of the other real uses I see in our system, we're a huge healthcare training system. We have thousands of trainees who need to learn how to work with a patient, how to work with a client like this. And the way we do it right now is, we have them read a book, we have them watch a class, and then we say, here's a patient, talk to them. And then we have a pretty highly paid faculty member watching them talk to that patient, stumbling to their first interaction. And after that's over, we say, okay, that was really neat, but how about try it this other way, try this other thing. It's very, very laborious. It's very hard to scale that kind of training. It's very expensive. And it's one of the rate limiting steps we have in our field to produce more people who have that skill to help more people. So what kind of thoughts might you have about using a tool like this, in training?
It's certainly something I'm really excited for, and that I see as a huge opportunity in many ways. If we can teach a machine to do certain things or grasp certain psychological concepts, maybe such a machine could also help somebody else understand similar concepts as well. So when I think about what could be the value add of throwing AI at it, which I don't may not always exist, may be net negative, but in this particular domain, I honestly have high hopes for. I think about kind of what is this value add? I think one thing is providing supportive scaffolding, for instance, in kind of while people are doing a certain task. I think there's aspects of providing deliberate practice. So for instance, people are already working on, for instance, like simulating patients, clients, end users to have much more realistic practice that helps the first session be kind of less awkward, to be able to kind of practice these skills in many more ways than maybe we currently have resources for. And kind of a third potential way to add value is then kind of through real-time feedback, to be able to help this clinician train by getting feedback on the spot, kind of potentially at the level of kind of great supervisors. And kind of being able to kind of make sure that most people kind of training in a certain domain actually have access to the best training and the best supervision, rather than a supervisor on paper.
Yeah, and I think, oh, now this one really works. And I think, we are kind of late coming in this field about using that kind of simulation technology. If you think about it, pilots don't fly a plane and they don't get to fly a 747 first. They work in a simulator, right? Many people in other parts of medicine have done simulation for a long time. You know, surgeons don't get to cut on me. You know, they get to cut on a no longer alive person first, and then they get to cut on a mannequin. They get to intubate, you know, a doll, you know, maybe 10 or 20 or 30 or 50 times before they get to do it to a live person. And in the very same way, it's very hard for us to have real people who can model every single illness, you know, with one of our trainees. So I think there's a lot of potential, and this is one of the areas we're going to talk about this afternoon that I want to invest in as a teaching institution. We want to build a really state-of-the-art dynamite simulation laboratory that helps us, you know, put our trainees through training with a, you know, with a simulated patient, with a virtual patient, until they got the basic skills down so well that then we can say, now sit with a real patient. So I think there's a lot of potential there. So we've talked a lot about potential benefits of using AI. What do you see as some of the risks, some of the caveats, some of the unintended consequences that we should all be paying attention to as we kind of jump into using these tools?
First, I'll start that there very much are potential negative consequences that we should take very seriously. That's something I worry about daily. Just to kind of, before getting into some of the examples, I think this is a very significant problem already today. I think in your introduction, you mentioned some more recent events of things that didn't go well. Nobody exactly knows, but there's kind of decent estimates that there's at least 15 million people in the US alone that regularly use ChatGPT for mental health questions. And I think one really important piece to understand is that this hyped up technology is currently being developed really not with mental health in mind. This is not even the second, third, or fourth thing on kind of most tech companies' minds who are really developing these models. Yet there's millions of people already using them, which is maybe not shocking given kind of lots of reasons for lack of access, stigma, etc. But for example, when we work with these type of tools, it takes us seconds to get any of these kind of chatbots or language models to say things that we're deeply concerned about from a safety perspective. It really doesn't take a lot, and a lot of that is based on these models not being particularly good assessing risks, certainly not in a mental health world. Most of kind of there's of course any large tech company will point to lots of AI safety efforts that they're doing. Many of them I know for good reasons, but none of them are really deeply informed by mental health or people's psychology. Really, primarily what they try to do is protect companies from liability, that if something goes wrong. And it turns out that kind of optimizing for liability, kind of trying kind of not to say the obviously wrong thing that obviously would lead to harm, they're just not nearly good enough for applications in mental health. And I think another thing to realize in terms of the risks, in general, kind of most of these chatbots and tools, they tend to be highly agreeable and deeply, deeply want to be helpful to you. And for instance, in mental health, and I know I'm a computer scientist, this is the type of things I have to learn from people in this room. Patients might ask for things or want to do things that might not be immediately in their best interest. Kind of computers are very happy to comply, I know, help you, feed obsessive compulsive behaviors, kind of no questions asked, for example. And kind of chances are this is happening, I don't know, many times, kind of every hour currently already, because these systems don't take these type of risks into account. One for example, even if kind of the way these systems are currently trained, which is kind of not for mental health applications or with mental health expertise, it's typically that if there's any human supervision at all, it would be somebody often poorly paid in a different country, in a different context, likely lacking all relevant mental health expertise. Like they will look at it, oh, they asked, let's say there's a person with kind of contamination OCD. They want to figure out how they can do everything in life without ever touching anything or doing it without gloves. Computers are happily to comply to explain what the best gloves are, how to put them on, how to pull them off without like all of these things. And then computer scientists working on these systems will look at it. Somebody asked for something, they got it. This is a success. We're likely even reinforcing kind of many of these things today, and what it needs and what's not currently at least by and large not done is really understanding the individual behind it, where kind of these models really are built for some kind of amorphous average of largely majority populations, and really don't take kind of individual level risks into account at the level of nuance that's required to do something meaningful in mental health.
So yeah, so a lot of potential, definitely some risks. This reminds me a little bit of a lot of bad therapists do just what their patient would like to hear. That may not be the right thing to do. Maybe some of these computers are just like bad therapists. It's good if your patient likes you and comes back and wants to pay some more. May not always be the right thing to do for them.
Very much so. Like in kind of computers, and at least one of the story you mentioned in the New York Times recently. There's an organization called Character AI. You get to simulate somebody else that you want to talk to. This is a multi-billion-dollar company and was related to one very unfortunate recent incident where a teenager died by suicide. Turned out they had great engagement metrics. Kind of turned out if you want to engage teenagers, kind of highly sexualized conversations with a fake girlfriend kept kind of the attention and engagement rather high. Right? Like in terms of the like mental health value, that's was very limited. But I think there's really fundamental tension here as well. Also, if we want to build this technology, on the one hand, we want to improve the engagement the best we can, because we know that's a challenge in mental health and in digital mental health. On the other hand, we also do not want dependence on any of these measures. That's not what actual kind of skill building looks like, or improving somebody's ability to take care of themselves or others. So there's really, I think, not only for human therapists, but for the machines as well as the business models in this world, they face a very similar tension like that.
So I'm going to try to wrap up this portion here. What I would say is, it's very clear that there's a tremendous amount of potential here, right? I think it's also very clear that us just saying this is all terrible, let's resist, let's put our head in the sand, is not going to work, because people are already doing this, right? So I think what we need to do is be smart, work with hopefully smart people, and think about what is it that we can do to use those technologies for the good. So 10 years, 20 years, 30 years from now, we are helping more people. We have good partnerships, I think, between humans and computers, and to really make a huge difference. So on that note, is there anybody in here who, and I know we got a few others here who are working in this space, wants to make a speculation of what my job might look like, or one of our therapists' jobs might look like 15 years from now that's different from today? Anybody want to leave us with a wild speculation? Inviting all of our tech friends up here, or non-tech friends too. How would I be working different, Dror, 15 years from now? So I'll have a co-therapist. A co-therapist, I said I'll have. Great. Other thoughts? How will I be? Yeah.
Use language every day in different ways, and that can give information that could potentially form at the point of care. You know, see that tells us how people's blood sugar has been since we last saw them as practitioners. It's possible we could come to measures derived from people's incidental languages, like searches and content that people interact with on video platforms, and how that if we can find things in people's use of language between clinic visits that could then inform the clinic visits for, so that's a way I could see technology.
Yeah, so we're interacting with technology all day long. Every one of us has one of these in our pocket, and it knows a lot of things about us. And if we could harness some of that information to help detect people who are at risk, who, you know, help reach out to people who are at risk, lots of potential there. Michael.
CBT is algorithmic, which there are reasons for that, both in terms of its development and its dissemination and maintenance. But it also speaks to a very important aspect of CBT, which is delivering scalable CBT. And step model, for example, where you're using an AI-based therapist as the first pass, the broadest pass to the broadest number of people. And then as complexity in the problem emerges, you advance to more sophisticated step care where AI might be an adjunctive or not at all. And you're going back to clinical wisdom.
So back in the day, there are some people who went out and bought the Feeling Good book on their own and read it and fixed themselves. They didn't need to come to me. And that's step one. If we can help a lot of people with that, what's wrong with that, right? Okay, all right. I think we have a comment over here or a question.
We've got some comments online too. Oops, sorry.
Okay, so there's a bunch of us online, and I'm sorry that I'm not paying a lot of attention to you. Maybe Becky has to help me with
So
that.
I'm one of the community people, so neither a medical professional nor a researcher, but I work in tech. But what I was struck by and where I thought you were working is very different than when you're working, because over the last 3 years, what we've heard is no matter how many psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers UW can produce, the need will never be met. And then the other thing I'm struck by is, and this is for all, I think for many in the medical profession, but many other professions, is fear of what is this going to do to my job? And so that has to be addressed and be forthright about it. However, what I think is interesting is to make the treatment of someone, to put it into the phases, and building off of what you said is where I thought you all were going to go today, was intake, because the amount of time that is wasted with mental health professionals channeling the patient to the right provider. And since everyone is already interacting online, that is not going to go away. So there are certain things that you can be the finger in the dike or say, given that is now true, can we make the AI smart enough to allow us to channel the person to the right provider and save time for all of you? And then the middle part of that, I think, is where you're all going to have the big controversy. But at the other end, the FACTS program, and there's others that have been described over the last couple of years of post-treatment at-home care or support, letting the AI take over some of that with the correct
Yep.
triggers to say maybe you need to be re-engaged. I think looking at the phases of it might make this a big win for everybody versus thinking it's going to be more of a threat than it is a huge opportunity to save the true professional's time.
Yeah, no, thank you for that comment, and I'll wrap on that comment for this portion here. I think you're absolutely right. We actually have a meeting next week where we're going to be talking just about what you just said, which is basically how do we create one front door to us that starts with a really good assessment where you are working with AI. You know, instead of 10 little clinics that we have, each of it has their own front door. You've got to find your way around. How do we help navigate people very quickly, figure out what is it they need? What do we have? You know, how do we bridge the gap? How do we make that all a lot more efficient? So that's the front end. I think you could start with that. And then it goes to the treatment. It could be, some of it could be completely computerized. Some of it could be a computer partnering with a human. And then I think in the back end, as you said, you know, when we have somebody who goes home after they're in treatment with us, you know, they still need support. They still need help. We already know a lot about them. They've spent some time with us. What if we had a tool that knows what they shared with us and they don't have to start all over with somebody? So I think there are lots of potential uses. I have to say, like I said this morning, I'm an optimist. I think we're going to be practicing very, very differently 5 or 10 years from now than we are today. I've been in this field for 30 years and nothing much has changed. You know, we have slightly different medications. We have a few more tricks in terms of psychotherapy, but we're still taking, you know, somebody has to come here, sit with us, we talk to them. I think 10 years from now, we're going to be doing things very, very differently. So I'm super excited about that. I do see the potential, but I also see the risks. And I appreciate that we have colleagues here at the university where we can actually try to navigate that and be smart about it. So thank you, Tim, for joining us. Thank you all. We're going to switch gears a little bit and engage all of your brains here. Jed, I think, are you going to help us with this next session? Okay, so what we're going to do now is, we're going to give each of you an opportunity to pitch us what we're going to be doing for the next 5 years. And Jed will talk you through how to do that little exercise. And you get to pitch your idea. You get to share it with a few people around you. And then after we come back from lunch, I'm going to be telling you what we think are the most compelling ideas we're getting from this group.
Right, and I think I'll just use this microphone here since. All right, so yes, I'll guide us through our crowdsourcing brainstorming activity today. This is the audience participation part of the event. And I should introduce myself first. Hi, everyone, I'm Jed. I'm the Associate Director of Communications for the department. And I should say that the people I've met and worked with through the Garvey Institute has been really one of the great pleasures since I joined the department in last June. So it's been nice to meet you all.
And Jed is the person who really did most of the putting together this fabulous report you have in front of you. He met with a lot of our professors. He was brand new to our department. And he came back and said, wow, there are some really cool people doing some really cool work.
I did, yeah, it's true. So today we're going to use the collective knowledge of this room to generate some ideas that we think might be worth exploring, and then also use your brain power here to identify which of those ideas we think have the most potential that we should really sink our teeth into. So before we start, I want to let the people online know that you can participate as well. And if you go to www.pigeonhole.at. Oh, we have a slide. That actually is the address you go to, pigeonhole.at. Okay, so once you get on there, you will see the passcode is GIBHS. So please join us. Folks here, you should have all received a card in your name tag. You're gonna need a pen for this also. So if anyone doesn't have a writing utensil, Andy's gonna walk around. She's got pens. We're gonna take about 5 minutes now to think about these 2 questions that are on your card. The first one is, if you had $1 million What big idea to improve brain health would you recommend? Think about that. And then the follow-up is, what would the first step be to get started with that idea? So I'm going to set a timer. We're going to take about 5 minutes. Think about that, write down your idea. And after those 5 minutes, I'll talk about the next step. All right, let's begin.
See all these brains working. No, 5 minutes is not a long time, but I know there are some of you who said, I need a day or two. And we didn't get you, we gave you no warning. So you just have to spit out your very best thought. $1 million. Got about 30 seconds remaining to wrap it up.
All right, we're at 5 minutes. It looks like almost everyone has stopped writing. So, all right. We all have our ideas generated. The next step is we're going to pass our ideas to somebody else. And we really want to get these shuffled around. So might need to stand up for this, but let's take a few seconds, maybe 30 seconds, and just pass these cards around. So pass it to someone near you. Once you have a new card, then pass that one to somebody else. Let's get these shuffled up. Let's get yours so far away that there's no chance you'll ever see it again. We want to lose your card, get someone else's. Keep on shuffling. Yeah, walk it across the room. Get it out of here. Couple more swaps. All right, they're looking pretty shuffled. One more swap. There we go. I'm watching. There we go. All right, let's consider those shuffled. All right, so what we're going to do now, you have somebody else's idea. We're going to take the next 5 minutes to consider those ideas. And one thing that I think will be helpful is if you partner up with someone near you and you can actually discuss the ideas that you're each holding with that person. So take a few minutes, discuss these ideas, and then at the end of these 5 minutes, you're actually going to rate this idea, what you think of it. You're going to give this a score of 1 through 5, 1 being bad, 5 being good. So we're going to use this process to help identify ideas that seem to be getting a lot of people very excited. So let's take 5 minutes to discuss those with a partner. Oh, we need some, oh, you don't have one at all? Does anybody have an extra card? All right, 5 minutes. All right, that's 5 minutes. All right, folks, let's wrap up this first round of conversation. If you could now flip your card over, once again, think about how you would rate that idea, and you don't necessarily have to agree with the person you were talking with. This is your own personal opinion, but flip that card over. You are now rater 1. So if you can write down what you would score that idea, and again, it's 1 being the lowest score and 5 being the highest score. All right. Great. So we're going to do this 2 more times. So let's take a, yes. You're only rating the card in your hand, not the other person you were talking with. Yeah. My bad. I skipped that step. Yeah. Yes, I skipped that step. So yeah, consult with your colleagues, but you are personally determining the score for this card. So just erase one of those, scratch one of those off. Okay, so now we want to get those cards as far away from you as possible once again. So let's do this shuffle, a few more seconds of shuffling, pass them around. All right. All right, looks like we're good and shuffled again. All right. Still shuffling. Okay, so same situation. You are now rater number 2 just for the card that you're holding, but you can discuss it with your partner, and you can find a new partner now. You can use the same partner, or you can just think on your own. Totally up to you. But we'll start the next 5 minutes right now. All right, about 30 seconds, 30-second warning. Definitely. All right, let's wrap up round number 2 here. So flip it over again, score it again. Now you have something to compare it to. You've talked about a few different ones. And it's okay, use that whole range of scores. You can give a 1, that's pretty harsh, but no one will ever know. I don't think anybody put a name on their card, so no one will know. All right, your rater number 2, write your score. And we're gonna do this one more time. So let's do another round of stand up, shuffle, mix and mingle, get those things moved around. All right, make sure you didn't somehow get your own card. It is possible. All right, they're all mixed up. Excellent. Let's take another 5 more minutes. Same thing. This is the final round. Starting right when I reset the stopwatch, right now. Oh, this is yours, Jürgen. You looking for this? Yeah, that's yours. About 30 seconds, 30 more seconds. All right, everyone, that's time. All right, flip that card over once more. Don't let those other two scores influence you. Write down your score. Don't let that happen. You're your own person. And if you could also add those up and write the total on there for us as well, that would be helpful. And then on your way out for lunch, Andy is at the door. She's got a box. If you can drop your card, and if you borrowed a pen, if you can drop those in the box on the way out. And then we're going to total up those scores and talk about some of the most interesting options after lunch. You want to say anything before we break, Jürgen? All right.
We are going to have lunch. Lunch is upstairs, and a couple of us are sharing some of projects that we're working on, some of the innovation awards. So talk to each other, look and see what people brought. And then we will come back from 1 to 2, and we'll talk about two things. We'll talk about what are we going to do for the next 5 years. I got some thoughts on it. I will share those, but we're starting with your thoughts. So I'm going to, while you're eating lunch, I'm going to do my best to sort of see what you all produced, and I'll share back some of that with you. But I'll do it in a more organized way, after this meeting. But so thank you and have a great lunch. Guys. All right, okay. So thank you all again for joining us. We're gonna go maybe for the next 45 minutes or so. And I wanna just give you a little preview of what I think might be ahead, but I got something very cool. I got all of this. I got millions of dollars of really brilliant ideas on these little cards here, which is a really neat trick. I want to thank Andy Uemoto for bringing this idea and saying, hey, we should just see what people think. It was very cool and very smart, and you guys did a nice job. You participated, so I'm gonna read out a few of the things that sort of floating to the top, but I'm not making any commitments about anybody getting any money. I just want to be really clear about that because we need a little more time to digest that in a thoughtful way. So a bunch of the stuff that floated to the top has to do with computers and AI, and that's either recency bias or it's because Tim gave a compelling enough argument that that might be a smart way to for us to spend some of our money. So I'll just sort of say this as a preview. So I'm just going to read some of this stuff because it's kind of fun. Okay, pilot a digital mental health clinic. A pragmatic demonstration of patient care leveraging all the best existing tech tools that we have access to and evaluate outcomes and costs. Okay. Nobody has to own up. No one's name is on it, but nobody has to own up. Okay, that sounds like something very close to things we have in mind already. To make that happen, and I know it says what we should do as a first step, I'm going to need to find a couple of really good clinicians who are actually willing to do that, not just researchers. And the just isn't the judgment. I'm just saying it's actually really hard to do this when it's not in your lab. So that's going to be one of the challenges, but it's clearly something we should take on at this point. So, all right. Multidisciplinary research center that provides centralized support for researchers to be able to do studies, clinical research space, IRB support, standing advisory board, all of these things. Probably nobody here who thinks that they couldn't benefit from that. Okay, so some really good core resources for clinical research. That's not, I think, something we are particularly good at as an organization. It probably goes well beyond what the Garvey Institute can or will do, but I think we have some real opportunities in that space. And yes, I have some more thoughts about it. Happy to engage on that topic. Okay, create an AI-powered online portal for those seeking mental health help to find the resources they need. Okay, all right. So somebody said, how about triaging? How about sharing information? I think those are all, that's a really great idea. We have to then think about, what does that look like? Is it patient facing? Is it family facing? What information does it learn from? What does it draw from? All kinds of really great questions, but definitely something that fits in, I think, where we'd like to explore. Okay, a public, open source, shared standard and benchmark to assess AI safely for mental health. Okay, all right. Introducing brain health. Okay, some of you guys got great writing. I'm glad I didn't write one because my handwriting is even worse. Introducing brain health as part of the educational curriculum in primary and secondary education and an effort to raise awareness and foster innovation. Okay, so when do we learn basic, brain health? Do we learn it in graduate school? Do we learn it, in high school? Do we learn it in elementary school? There are some really interesting questions, and there's some really cool stuff out there to think about, teaching brain health to teaching about emotional health earlier on in life. And we have a couple colleagues in our department in the Smart Center who've given some really interesting thought to that. And there are others at the university who have some interesting ideas around that. That's something I could definitely see getting people together and thinking about. Okay. If people dedicated time in their day to improve connections with the community of their choice, maybe meet in person one time per week, maybe virtually, anything to support forming positive connections that improve their mental health, normalize the notion of prioritizing contact with others to be well mentally. Okay. First step, public health campaign and a demonstration project. Okay. So that's an interesting concept. So there's a lot that people are learning now or talking about now that I had not heard talk about 10 years ago, which is about social connections, social isolation. We had a Surgeon General, right, who devoted a huge part of his work to social isolation. Be interesting to talk more about that, to see how would we operationalize that in a meaningful way. Here's one from online. Okay, we're coming back to AI. Again, see a recency bias or we're onto something here. Harness AI to help mental health clinicians screen patients for possible underlying health conditions that could be driving their symptoms. Okay, so I think people are going online for sure to figure out what's wrong with me. A lot of us don't know, is it in my body? Is it in my mind? I think we could debate about that. But yes, could we build something that helps people figure out what might be going on? Where might they turn to for help? Could we do something that helps with triaging? Could we do something that helps us? As people come at us to say, this looks like it could be X. The best place to start would be a self-help tool, or would be this kind of a clinician or that kind of a clinician. That would be a lot smarter than, somebody waits for 4 months to get an appointment with me, and then they come and tell me a story, and I know 5 minutes in, I'm probably not really the best person to see them. So we should be able to do a lot smarter, a lot better than that. Really great question. Okay. Create an intervention or a tool for patients to share their stories that can help them find the most salient information to share in the first meeting they have with a provider. Okay, maybe I think that's what it says. So a couple of thoughts I have about that. One of them is yes. Could we help? Two thoughts I have. One of them is, could we help people be better at articulating what they want, what they need, what they would expect at the front end of an interaction with a clinician. The other thought I have is there's a lot of wisdom in people who've lived with a certain illness. We're not very good at helping them share with each other, connect with each other. I'm thinking about a concrete example. A couple of years ago, I had a conversation with one of my sisters who adopted children who were pretty neurodiverse. And my sister said, one of them, I'm having such a hard time getting them to brush their teeth. And I go talk to the doctor and they're like, I don't know anything about brushing teeth. But I'm like, there are 10, 15 parents out there that have the same kind of kid that have figured out how to do this. How do we connect that? How do we make that happen? How do we help people connect with each other and share what they've learned living with an illness or with a child? So there might be some interesting ways for us to use use technology to help people share with each other, support each other. That's one of my thoughts I have around the FACTS program that we're starting to get off the ground. We're family, we support families, but we could also think about families have a lot of wisdom. They get a lot of knowledge and skills and wisdom, that stuff that doctors might not know. I don't know anything about brushing teeth. I'm not a dentist, but you know what I'm trying to say. So I think that's another really interesting idea. How can we crowdsource and support people sharing stuff with each other? Dissemination of information about existing evidence-based practices for the behavioral health workforce and the public. Translational efforts to make descriptions and demonstrations more understandable.
support for training and TA activities to better prepare evidence-based practice delivery to the behavioral health workforce. Okay, first step. Speak to Tim about ways in which AI may be used for generating these evidence-based practice descriptions and demonstrations. All right, you're going to be busy, man. Yeah, so as I said, I feel like we got to invest in simulation, in training that doesn't wait until, if I'm a clinician, it'll take me, I don't know, 5-6 years to see one of everything, even if you take the 80th% most common things that come at a mental health clinician, with a computer, you could simulate 80% of what might come at you in probably 2 weeks, and you could do that asynchronously. You can watch it, you can see it again. We have a lot of simulation in all kinds of other training. A pilot would never fly a plane first. They would play on a video game, and then they would probably fly in a simulator, and then they'd fly on a plane, right? We should think about what would that look like, if we shared what a problem looks like, and B, what the therapeutic strategies might look like, right? Can we use some kind of a tool to help us with the learning? Use AI to identify people with mental health risk and engage them at various levels. Provide resources, have a conversation, connect to care. Okay, so identifying and engaging people, right? Okay. Use AI technology to improve detection and monitoring of mental health and substance use treatment. Implement improved screening, early intervention to supplement the workforce. Okay, I don't think I need to say much. I think there's definitely a theme here. Form a research and clinical care partnership where staff and patients collaborate to identify research goals and accomplish those goals alongside clinical care delivery. Focus initially on trauma recovery, where community support is part of effective treatment. Okay. Identify an effective governing structure, integrate existing examples and experiences. Okay, that needs a little bit more thought, but there's some very good thoughts in here. Invest in efforts to scale access to start or enter behavioral health. So this is again front end stuff. How do we engage, triage, direct people? How to create some efficiencies in how we do that? So I think we have a theme there for sure. So it's work on the front end, and then on the back end, we might think about things like, once we get started on a particular treatment, can you get engaged with it, and at some point, can you practice with a machine? Because if we have to do all the practice we need to do in changing our thoughts and our behaviors with a human, it just might be very hard to scale, right? Pathways to mental health care. Okay, I'm trying to find something that's a truly different theme here. Some condition-specific thoughts, ADHD. People at suicide risks. Okay, so there's a ton of really neat stuff here. Thank you all. I need to take more time. We all need to take more time digesting some of these, but there's a lot of good ideas here. We will take good care of looking through them, organizing them a little bit, maybe finding a way to feed them back, and using that to help us think about what else we could take on together as a next step. So I'm going to share. Anybody else want to call out anything else? Anybody who I totally misrepresented here? So I just had lunchtime, so that's all the time I had to try to digest some of what you suggested, but it was super great and very helpful. Okay,
I'm going to make a couple more comments. This is our current thinking. So as you heard this morning, we think of how we invest, this resources we have. We think about it in a couple of ways. In some ways, investing in people. In some ways, investing in programs. Some of it involves places. There were several cards here I didn't read in a lot of detail that said I need space, I need a clinic, I needed this, I needed that. Yes, so do we invest in space or spaces for people to do the right kind of work together? And then the last one is something we haven't gotten into very much, but there is a whole bunch of opportunities for us, I think, to do good work in policies that affect how we work, how we practice. And that's an area that we are going to try to explore some. So as I said, in the next year, especially once we no longer have a hiring freeze at UW Medicine, we're going to try to launch a couple more recruitments. Two of them are going to be supported by endowed professorships. One of them is going to be focusing in addiction medicine, and the other one is going to be focusing on cognitive aging. And when we do that, we'll put that out. And I would hope that you all can help us with networking, because the way we find really, really good people for these kinds of things is not by putting an ad in a newspaper, but by networking, by having you all reach out to people who you know, who say, no, I can't do this, but I know somebody else. So when we do that, I'm going to try to draw on all of you to try to help use your networks to help us find some really great people. And the same, we're going to put out calls for 3 early career faculty that we would like to bring on who are clinician scientists. So these would be people who are clinicians or clinician scientists or clinicians who would like to partner with scientists. And the 3 areas in particular that we want to focus on, one of them is building on the program we have started in neuromodulation and interventional psychiatry. One of them will be 1 or more clinicians who are actually trying to use these tools in our real clinics. So this notion of going back to the first one here, that's the one that got one of the highest scores, is building an actual clinic that uses all these tools. So we can work out the bugs of what does it look like from the front to the middle to the back end. And we're probably going to make a bunch of mistakes and learn, but I'd really like to do that alongside with a really smart clinician who is both a knowledgeable user of AI, but also a really good clinician who can help us, actually do that in the real world. And the third one is an area that's relatively new. I mentioned it a little bit this morning. We are starting a really nice partnership with our School of Law. There's a lot of really interesting stuff that's at the interface between what we do as mental health clinicians and what happens in the law. A couple of very concrete thoughts. One of them is we could build a clinic that's for people who have needs that are both benefiting from legal help and mental health help. The second one is we have in the state of Washington a really complex set of civil commitment laws. It's not, I think my sense is they're not terribly satisfying for anybody. And I'd like to have a really good, thoughtful collaboration between a clinician on our end and colleagues in the law school to take a very good comprehensive look at how that's at work in our state, how do other states do it, and maybe come up with some really smart policy recommendations. We have made, those laws were written in the 1960s when there were terrible abuses in mental health. Think about One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Think about, people were committed to state hospitals for long, long times because their husband was having an affair and got a spouse committed. There are some horrible abuses of, civil commitment when you go back to the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, and I think the laws were written very well intended, but sometimes now they don't work terribly well anymore. And they've been revised multiple times, but I think it'd be smart for us to take a very good, thoughtful look at what do we do? What do other states do? Is there something smarter that would work better for the people that we care for our family members? So that's a big project I'd like for us to engage in. So those are a couple of recruitments. I hope to bring some new people or to support people that are already here who really want to work with us in a focused way on these areas. I think we're going to continue to grow and support our clinician scientist training program. As I said, we've supported 19 people. That's very early career investments, but I think that has a lot of promise. And I think we're doing a next round of funding that's going to get announced in April. I think I'm very happy so far with what I see about our neuropsychiatry and behavioral neurology fellowship. If I think not 10 years out, but if I think 20 years out, I don't think there's going to be neurology and psychiatry. There's going to be brain health. And so we're going to need doctors who are brain health doctors, not neurology doctors and psychiatry doctors who argue about who's smarter and who knows more about the brain. So maybe that's a little start on that. And I don't know, I was one of those people in my training, I had to sort of decide at some point, am I going to be a neurologist or a psychiatrist? But I would have probably liked to know a little bit more about each of them. So I think that's a good start on that. It won't solve all those problems, but I think it's an area that I'd like to continue to invest in. And I think we have a really fabulous facility now at our Center for Behavioral Health and Learning that has the capability to train and provide a lot of really good state-of-the-art neuromodulation care. I would like to think about actually doing a fellowship program because I think neurologists and psychiatrists who want to work in that space need additional training. They're not going to be able to get that in 3 years or 4 years of residency. So I'd like to do a one-year fellowship for people who are really going to become experts in interventional psychiatry and neuromodulation therapies. All right. Okay. We have, and some of you know this, the University of Washington, UW-Medicine got a planning grant from the Washington Research Foundation to develop something which is going to be a statewide initiative for neuroscience called WIN, Washington Initiative for Neuroscience. That's currently just an idea with a planning grant. I'm very engaged with a group of others at UW in articulating that. And the next step would be to write a much bigger grant, maybe $10, $15 million kind of size to say, how do we promote neuroscience statewide? And I think that when that moves along, I think we will have some nice opportunities to engage with that initiative. I already mentioned the partnership that we are starting to develop with our colleagues in the School of Law, and I'm kind of excited about that. I think that has a lot of potential. I'm a person who loves to work at interfaces. I've spent most of my career, not in a silo, but at the interface, at a space between two things. So that's another opportunity that I think we have to do that. And as I mentioned, the third one here on this collaboration with law, most people who are living with a serious mental health or addiction problem, their first contact is not usually a mental health professional. Their first contact is with a cop, is with somebody who's in jail, is with somebody who's, who's looking at them from a perspective of enforcing a law, but they're not trained to help somebody who's struggling with a serious mental health or addiction problem. And so there's a lot of talk about that right now. Is stuff we can see on the street every day, but there aren't a lot of concrete examples yet of how we actually work well together. I don't think we're going to get cops to feel like they should be social workers. I don't think we're going to get social workers to feel like they should be cops. But there's interesting work on co-responder models. There's all kinds of neat stuff out there that people are doing in different communities. And I'd like to take a good look at that and say, is there something smart that I see that could really make a difference in our community? And can we support people and invest in something like that? Okay. Spaces, I will, this is a really neat picture that I stole from a report that some of you will recognize. This is Harborview's vision for a new behavioral health building. It's going to be on 9th and Alder, so right at the edge of the current Harborview campus. That was an idea a couple of years ago. It's more than an idea now. There is a preliminary report, and there's plans to get going on this building. Sometime in the next 2 years. It's a 15 or 17-story building that's all devoted to behavioral health. Almost all of the clinical services that happen on the Harborview campus in behavioral health will be in this building. Inpatient care, outpatient care, intensive outpatient care. And I think there we will have an opportunity partnering with Harborview to use some institute resources to put together a really nice innovation clinic that might be housed there. And that's probably where I would advocate we locate a really great simulation training program. So that's an opportunity. And I think if we do that and we partner well, we could do something really neat together. Two more ideas. These are sort of ideas that have been brought to us from the community and from some of our advisors and some of the families that have really cared and be passionate about the work we do. One of them is this notion of a therapeutic community, a place where a person who's living with a serious mental health or addiction problem that's going to affect them most of their life can live and have a good life. We have outpatient care, we have inpatient care, we have a long-term hospital now, but if somebody lives with serious mental illness like schizophrenia, they can spend maybe 3, 4, 6, 8 months in our new hospital on the Northwest campus, but they're not going to want to live in that new hospital for the rest of their lives. And we have very little in the state of Washington that I would look at and say, this is a safe, good, healthy place for somebody like that to go live. And so there are other states that have, in other countries, I've seen some really beautiful things. For example, in the Netherlands, I've seen a really, really great program in Italy. Countries that deinstitutionalized in the same way that we did, but they didn't just kick people out on the street. They really invested in places to live in communities where people can be neurodiverse. They're not all going to be the same, but they have the kind of support they need. They have opportunities to learn. They have opportunities to do, work that's meaningful to them. I'd like for us to, and we're going to spend a year or two really looking around at communities around the country and maybe around the world and saying, is there something like that we could build here in the state of Washington that would really be a model where people would look at it and say, yes, if I have a child, I would have that child live there. There's going to be a lot of interesting questions that we have to sort out, clinical questions, financial questions, business questions. What's the business model for something like this? But I want to invest in that. I feel like we have a lot of stuff for acute care. We don't really have anything good that comes after that. And as we get going with that, if any of you have an interest in that topic, I'm happy to engage with you on that. The last thing is a really crazy idea that's probably very audacious, but I would like to do something we're going to call Raising Washington. And the idea here is how much can I move upstream when it comes to mental health care and brain health. So there are about 85,000 children who are born in the state of Washington every year. And we could probably all pretty quickly agree there's probably about 10,000 of these babies that are born under what I would consider a pretty high risk circumstance. So maybe you have a mother who is struggling with a serious mental illness or a drug addiction. Maybe you have a domestic violence situation. You have a single parent who is struggling financially. We could probably say, yeah, most of us would agree that's a really high risk situation. So what if what we know is that a child who's born in a situation like that, let's say if your mother is struggling with serious depression or drug addiction during pregnancy, that child is born with a brain that's a different brain from most other children. They've had a tremendous amount of exposure to stress hormones for 9 months in utero. They might have been exposed to things that are truly toxic for that developing brain. And now you have a child who's born and you might have a very fussy baby and a mother who is really stressed out. And all we know about attachment and what is good for somebody in the first 2 or 3 years of life are going to be very challenging to make happen. So what if we said, what is it that we know about mental health, about parent training, about all of the supports we could bring to bear on a person like this for the first 1,000 days of a baby's life? What if we were able to really provide very comprehensive, good, sort of comprehensive peripartum support for a high-risk situation, a high-risk mom, a high-risk family like this? And what dividends would it pay, 5 years out, 10 years out, 15 years out? That's a big commitment. I think it's a doable thing. I'd like to pilot it here. We deliver about 1,000 babies here at UW-Medicine. We could take 100 of those babies and say, let's try that, and let's have 100 babies who are in a control group and see what happens over time. And if that works, we could do it statewide. 50% of the kids who are born in the state of Washington are covered by our state Medicaid plan. The state has a huge investment in that. And if that idea works, I think 10,000 isn't too many. It's not a million. I think we could probably do that. So that's a really ambitious goal. We'd have to think about who all needs to come to the table. I think we have colleagues in the School of Nursing who've done a lot of really smart work around parent training. We have people in our department who know about perinatal mental health and addiction support. We have people in pediatrics and OB we can partner with. We have people in social service agencies all over our community. The question is not, do we have people who know how to help? The question is, how do we stitch it all together? So the person really does feel supported, and does it make a difference? I had an interesting conversation 25 years ago. I was fairly early in my career, and I spent a year at the World Health Organization, and the director of the World Health Organization at the time was a woman named Gro Brundtland. Gro was a very interesting woman. She was a 3-time Norwegian prime minister. She'd been prime minister of Norway 3 times. She was also a family doctor, and she was now the head of the World Health Organization. And at that time, we didn't have a lot going at WHO in mental health. Most of the focus was on infectious diseases and some other things. And I spoke up in a meeting and I said, we should have more investment in mental health stuff. And she took me for a walk in the rain in a park outside of the big WHO building. And she had an umbrella and I didn't. And I think she enjoyed that. She knew how to kind of make sure men didn't feel like, she knew how to put you in your right place in a good way. And we walked really fast and she said, okay, if I gave you $1 for mental health, what would you do? And I thought about it for a minute and I said, I'd probably try to help a woman who's pregnant, who's either struggling with a serious mental health problem or addiction. And she said, well, why would you do that? I said, because, that's a high risk situation. The baby might come out with a different brain. The attachment might not go very well. There was a beautiful report written for the WHO in 1950 by a guy named John Bowlby, British psychologist, who talked about attachment and what importance of attachment was. And I pulled all that out and I said it to her and she goes, yeah. She said, that's a really neat story, but is there any science that sort of says any of these dots actually connect in the way you're making the story? And back then there wasn't that much of science, but now all these dots are connected. So it's very clear. If we did the right things at the right time, I think we could make a huge difference. So that was a long story, but this is something I'd like for us to invest in. And I think we'd have to mobilize a bunch of other smart people to come along. But those are some thoughts that we have currently. We've got a lot more really neat ideas here. We're happy to hear from any of you about any of these ideas. If you find any of that stuff we just said interesting, reach out, let us know, as we get going on some of this. And is there anything else that we should talk about that you would like to suggest? Any concerns you have? Anything else you want to bring up before we wrap for the day? So this was just a little bit of a look ahead at what else could we take on. Thoughts, questions? Don't be so shy. Make any sense? Roar.
Yeah. In relation to the Raising Washington one, I think you make an excellent point about maternal mental health. I just like to also emphasize the role of fathers and familial outcomes and mental health as it pertains to men's mental health, fathers training and parenting. So something that I think is often widely ignored as an area for possible intervention.
No, I agree totally. And I'm sorry if it came out just talking about moms. Oftentimes it's a family and sometimes it's just a dad. And when you read the thing that Bowlby wrote, he wrote about maternal love and maternal child bonding, but he said it's a mom or somebody who's taking the role of a mom. And it's very clear that, we shouldn't just think about women. I mean, we should strengthen and support a whole family. And sometimes it's supporting a dad. Absolutely. Yeah. Totally well taken. Thank you. All right. Other thoughts? Any of that come as a total shock to you? Anybody have a real allergic reaction to any of those things we just brought up? Concerns? Yeah, Rebecca.
like our traditional model, especially United States, maybe more than other places, is we're like one clinician works with one patient, right? And we have sort of limitations on how much we connect that patient to family, or as clinicians, we interact with the larger family or community, and we think one person at a time. And a lot of the things we've talked about today maybe give an opportunity to break out of that a little bit. So I think research-wise, it's been clear for a long time that we lose a lot by only thinking about one person, because mental health always kind of operates for most of what we talk about in terms of how somebody is functioning in their family and community and society. And to the extent we are thinking about supporting perinatal families, that's an obvious opportunity to think not just individuals, but how are these people connected and supported when we talk about population and health generally, like the chance to any way we can break out of that, but I only actually talk to one person at a time or look at outcomes one person at a time model might be an opportunity to change. And even in the AI discussion, right, I was thinking about the biggest fear I have with, you know, a chatbot therapist, right, is losing that human connection that I really, you know, as a clinician, I believe that like the fact I'm a person here caring about you as a person is part of the therapy. It's what lets somebody talk about trauma and feel supported, and like it's part of that link. And so I have this fear of losing that in an AI environment. But I also wonder if part of what it would give us the opportunity to do is to think about how to connect people in communities. We like clearly that's how people are using technology often is to form communities that aren't actually sort of formally supervised, and that can have terrible outcomes. But if we pay attention to that dynamic all the way along, we can actually measure and shape the dynamic and maybe make it therapeutic. So anyway, thinking about all the things that we talked about, it seems like lots of what we're doing here has the opportunity to like be really intentional about thinking about what the societal and community outcomes are. How would we measure it all along? How would we intentionally build something that supports those outcomes?
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, and I think you can see that concept in a bunch of the stuff. I mean, mostly when we're talking about partnerships, we're talking about, you know, having more than one person, because none of us have all the answers. That's very clear. It's very humbling. You could be the best clinician in the world, but 80% of the time, the person who comes to you, you don't have everything you need to fix that person, right? So I think I see that in the partnership effort. I see that in the efforts that we're making to say, can we support families? Can we support caregivers? I would see that in when we're saying, you know, the unit that we're trying to help is a family rather than an individual person. But I think there's a lot of wisdom in that and what you say. And so anytime we have opportunity to bring that to any of this work, I think we would probably be a smart thing to do. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Other thoughts? Questions? Anything you heard today that you think, wow, that's crazy? Why are they wasting money on that? So our donors are not here anymore, so you can speak up. Okay. Okay. All right. Well, I think you know how to find me, you know how to find the rest of our staff. Reach out. We'd love to hear from you. I thank you for all the work you're doing already. I think it's been really fascinating for me. You know, when we conceptualized this idea 5 years ago, I had some thoughts about what might happen, what we might be able to do, but that's not exactly how it went. But I'm super excited about what we are doing and what you all are doing. I appreciate the nudges I get intermittently from our advisors who are saying, okay, how are you going to scale any of this? How is this going to really help a person in need? I think we're slowly moving that way. And yeah, any other thoughts you have, just, you know, speak up. I'll end with what I said this morning. I know some of you, especially those of you who are spending a big portion of your day doing NIH-funded research. This is a scary time. I've been around long enough. I remember when Ronald Reagan came in, they paused funding for almost an entire year. It was incredibly scary and disruptive for people. You know, right now it seems another one of those times where there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty, and it's scary, and I acknowledge that, and we will do our best.
to navigate that. But I have faith in the basic problem that we have. That's not going away, right? Hopefully we are getting smarter about how to address that problem, and somebody is going to figure out a way to, work with us on doing that. So the next couple of months could be a rocky journey. I feel like we're taking a big ship and navigating it into a storm. I do feel like we may have some situations where we have to take our sails down a little, because otherwise it might just get ripped off in the storm. We might have to find some new ways of doing things, but we'll make our way through that, and let's support each other and find our way through whatever challenges we have. So thank you, and thanks for coming today, and thanks to Andy and Becky and everybody on the team for putting together a great gathering, and have a great rest of the day. Thank you.